How you feeling? I mean, really, how are you feeling in your body right now? You're probably sitting down while you're watching this YouTube video. Or maybe you're one of those types that likes to multitask. Maybe you've got it on your phone while you're driving. Try to explain that to somebody if you get pulled over. Or maybe you're in the bathroom getting ready and you've got the video going, but you're not really paying attention. Or maybe you're one of the folks who, like I do when I watch YouTube videos, I actually sit down and watch them. And I may take notes, but I just watch them, especially if it's like a how-to video of some sort. So if you're focused, if you're seated or standing watching this video, take a quick survey. How are you physically feeling? You know, I find that when I ask people that I coach or folks within my own enterprises, how did that make you feel? Or how are you feeling? Almost everybody responds with an answer to a question I didn't ask. Like, I feel like I didn't do a very good job, or I feel a little irritated that they made that decision and not that decision, or I feel ignored. Those kinds of things. And then I listen and understand what they're saying, and then I say, but how are you feeling in your body? And maybe I'll back it up to an event that they're specifically talking about, and I'll say, how did you feel in your body when you heard the news, or when the question was asked, or when that showed up on your caller ID or saw the email? How did you feel in your body? And I find that a lot of times folks can't answer that question. So let's practice it for just a second right now. Right now, what are you feeling in your body? This is important because I want to hang an idea on this that will be life-changing for you, especially if you are a leader or a manager or an influencer of people and you experience stress. Of course you experience stress, unless all you ever do is drink Jack Daniels. Well, this is not Jack Daniels. This is a very nice whiskey. Not that Jack Daniels isn't nice, but it isn't, okay? So maybe you just have copious amounts of distracting behaviors so you never really notice what you feel. Or maybe you're the kind of person who sort of looks around and thinks, nothing really stresses me out. Well, it's likely you wouldn't have clicked on this video if that were you. You and I experience stress on a regular basis. We've talked about it in other videos. And when we are stressed, most of us just kind of cope with it. We just kind of grit our teeth and clench our fists and put our head down and go through it without realizing what's actually going on. Remember that stress is fear. And as a leader, especially in kind of confusing times when it seems like the rules are changing out from under us all the time, and we're hearing people over here shouting, go this way, and the people over here shouting, you can't make me. And it's pretty intense right now for a lot of folks who are leaders or managers or supervisors of people. And so in the middle of this kind of an environment, you're probably feeling quite a bit of stress. But stress is fear. This is very important to understand. No one knows how to manage stress, but we all know what to do with fear if we recognize that it's fear. So here's the first thing I would like to be able to share with you. And I'll walk you through 6 basic ideas that are really powerful ideas. And if you can do them one right after the other, they're easy to remember, you will find yourself an incredibly resilient person in the face of stress/fear. And that is the very first idea. Remember, stress is fear. Here's the second idea. The second idea is that your body will tell you you're stressed. That's probably the last time I'll use that word till the end of this video. Afraid, instead, is the word I will use. Your body is telling you you're afraid before you're even consciously, cognitively aware of it. Our bodies, especially as adults, even young adults, but adults throughout our life, we have learned to be afraid. We've learned to have certain type of fear responses. Our body is telling us something is a threat. Now, it may not actually be a threat, but we perceive it as a threat because we have a threat-reward brain. Our brain is designed to be able to perceive everything around us and put it in these 2 buckets. It's either a threat or a perceived threat, or an imagined threat, or a real threat, or it's a reward. And if it's neither, we don't pay much attention to it at all. So if we think, perceive, imagine that something is a threat, we will go into threat mode, and our body will tell us there's something to be afraid of. Now, it may not be all that accurate, but it will go full on to threat mode. Your body will tell you you're afraid. And if you want to become a resilient person, connect the feelings in your body with the perception of threat. Now, not all feelings, obviously, are saying I'm being threatened, but you know which ones they are. What are they? For me, if I have that immediate threat response in my body, I will feel a little queasy in my stomach. It's a little bit of a shot of adrenaline. I'll feel, some people call it like butterflies in their stomach. It's followed immediately by a tightening in my chest. Then I notice a tightening in my shoulders and in my neck, and then a tightening in my hands. 1, 2, 3. That's how long it takes for that to happen, and it is intense. Then I go into, very, very quickly, another 2 to 3 seconds later, I'll go into what's been called cognitive tunneling. I can only think about that thing. I can't hear anything. I can't imagine anything out there. I can only think in very loose, foggy terms about that thing that is a threat. Recognize that. Recognize it. Recognize it. Have you felt it today? Is there any time during the day today when you got that little body shot, boom, that was a fear shot in you? And if you're like most people, if you had it today or can remember it from yesterday, you just tried to ignore it. You just maybe took a breath and just kind of gritted your teeth and just went through it and completely ignored it. Have you had it today at all? If you have, or yesterday, or there's someone around you that you care about and you're leading or helping to manage or supervise in some way you're influencing that person, and they've had that kind of response today, pay attention to it. And here's the step. It's very, very simple. Pay attention to your body. Remember, stress is fear. Our body will go into fear mode. And then the third step is to notice it's fear. This is fear. And ask, what am I afraid of? This is fear. What am I afraid of? Don't talk yourself out of it. Oh, I shouldn't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of, and pat yourself on the head in a condescending way. That is fear. I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? Now, you're probably going to be afraid of something that you think is either a threat to your status. It's a criticism threat. Here's two kinds of threats. Something that where I'm afraid I'm going to be criticized by people that I care about, or it's a control threat. I'm going to feel that like it's out of control. I don't have enough time, enough money, enough wisdom, enough friends, enough tools. I don't know what I'm doing. It's out of my control. Control threat or a criticism threat. And that is really what, most of the time, in a modern society, in a connected society, that's what our body is saying to us. You are afraid of a criticism threat. You are afraid of a control threat. And it happens just like that. Okay, so remember, step one, I don't know that stress is fear. And step two, understand my body will feel the fear before I consciously am aware that there's something to be afraid of. I'll feel it physically. Then I can kick my brain into gear and say, whoa, that's fear. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of either a control threat or a criticism threat. That's what I'm actually afraid of. Follow that up with this question. Have I been afraid of this ever before? Now, you may need to get away for a moment in order to think this part through. If you're sitting at a table in a meeting and something happens in that meeting that gives you that threat response, you may need to take a little bit of note, think about this later. You might need to get away from the distraction of being around other people in order to think this through just a little bit. Have I ever been afraid of this kind of thing before? Of course you have, because you've learned that fear response, as I have. I learned that fear response a year ago, or 10 years ago, or when I was 11. I learned that fear response. Almost all of our fear responses, which we feel first in our body, are learned fear responses. Not all, but almost all of our fear responses we learned. And we learned them a while ago in a situation where we felt actually threatened. And so we went into that fear response mode. Then, here's the fourth thing. Now that I know, I have experienced this before, this is actually fear. Now that I know that, and now that I know what I'm afraid of, don't be too precise, but it's a control threat or it's a criticism threat. This is out of control. I'm afraid this will happen, or I'm afraid that person will think like that of me, negatively of me. Well, then relax that a little bit. You don't have to get super precise, but then ask yourself this question. What do I usually do when I'm afraid of that? Because you have developed some patterns. You have developed some habits that have helped you to try to deal with fear like that. Now, it happens all the time. It happens to us all the time. We live in a fear industrial complex, so there's all kinds of things being thrown our way that are specifically designed to get us to spend time and money because we're afraid. And so if we're connected at all, there's a lot of stuff around us that will cause us to have that fear response and then do something. Well, what do you do when you're afraid? We know that there are a couple of different tracks down which we can go when we have this fear response. We either go down what's called an adaptive track or down a maladaptive track. And you can tell by those words exactly what they are. A maladaptive track is a track I go down to try to deal with the feelings of the fear, but never get at the fear and not get stronger. And I become more and more and more vigilant about things that make me afraid. And I try to arrange my life almost becoming hyper vigilant in my fear, to borrow a term from research around those who suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome or disorder. Hypervigilance is that heightened sense that although I'm not afraid right now, anything could happen at any second that could be a threat to me, and then I will go into full threat mode, which means that my fear switch is like a trigger, a hairpin trigger on a pistol. I'm ready to be afraid at any given point in time. And so I will do things to try to avoid situations that will create fear in me. Or maybe another maladaptive track down which I run is to try to just deal with the feelings of fear instead of trying to be ready for things that create fear for me all the time. And I develop habits and patterns that actually make me worse off, and perhaps even those around me, simply to try to avoid the feelings of fear. That is a maladaptive track. Maybe that's what you do when you're afraid. You used to call it stress, remember? It's actually fear. Or an adaptive track you could choose to go down, which is one that I'm suggesting right here. Recognize it hits the body first. Recognize that it's fear. And then ask, what am I afraid of? Is it a threat to my affiliation with people? Am I going to be criticized and ostracized? Or is it a threat to my control? Or is it both? What am I afraid of? And more specifically, not too precisely, but more specifically, what am I afraid of? Then take a deep breath and realize, what have I done? What are my habits that help me, theoretically, help me deal with this fear? Do those habits actually work? Do I need a new pattern? Perhaps I need a new pattern in dealing with this fear. And even little fears, by the way, things that you might look at that this is not some big deal, will have a big physiological response to fear regardless of its size that is the same. A little fear over here and a big fear over there, same physiological response to it. Okay, if I'm hiking through the woods and telling bear stories as I'm hiking and a small chipmunk jumps out on the trail, I'm going to physiologically, probably even psychologically respond to that chipmunk like it's a grizzly bear. Instead of taking the moments it might take to reappraise. Well, I'm suggesting to you here that you can learn to reappraise, but not if you don't know that it's fear. So reappraise. What have I been doing to deal with this fear? Is there another way? Is there a better way to deal with this fear? Remember, by now you've already answered the question, what am I afraid of? What have I done before? And now we're going to get to this question. This is actually the fifth step, and it's pretty straightforward and very liberating. Answer this. What would you do if you were not afraid? Sit with that for just a minute. What would I do with this situation that's causing a physical fear, and now a mental fear, if I were not afraid? Take a deep breath and sit with that for just a moment. What would I do? Now, don't stop there. Don't stop there, because your fear will come back in like the tide. There needs to be one more step. If that's what I would do if I were not afraid, what's the very first step that I need to take in order to get to that thing that I just described in my head? What is that? And take the first step right now, but make it so small that you can actually take it in a matter of moments. Maybe the first step for you is to actually send someone a text. Can we talk later this afternoon? Maybe the first step for you is to actually open up your checking account and look at the money that's in there. Really look. Or look at that credit card statement and look at the actual balance and then look at what you've been spending your money on. Maybe that's your first step. Maybe the first step is to stand up and walk down the hallway and sit down with a person and say, hey, can we talk for a minute? Maybe your first step is to open up your calendar and put something on your calendar that is the taking of the first step. But putting it on your calendar is small enough that you can actually do it. Whatever that is, you know what you would do if you were not afraid. Do you know what the first step is? And make it small. If you're resisting to that first step, it's probably too big. Make it smaller, make it smaller, make it smaller. But here's the kicker. Take the first step right now. So what you've done is you've noticed that you live in a stressful, fear-inducing job and world. You've noticed that stress is fear. You've noticed that your body feels it first, and that you have been able to point out that you've been able to figure out that you're afraid of either criticism or losing control, or maybe it's both. You've thought for a moment about what do you normally do in situations like this, because you learned this when you were 6. You learned it when you were 16. You've been doing this for a long time, and this pattern that you've developed may be actually a maladaptive pattern. It may make things worse. The habit you've put in place to deal with fear like this might actually make things worse. And then you said, what would I do if I were not afraid? Sat with that for 30 seconds or a minute. And then you've boiled it down and you've taken the first step. You're going to live in a world where there's, and so am I, for a long time to come, where there are more and more and more and more triggers to fear, because society around us has figured out that a great way to get herds of people to run this way or that way, or stop doing this or start doing that, or spend lots of money, is to make us afraid. Sad, but that is actually where we are right now. And so it is your job to recognize that stress is fear, manage your fear. And you can become, by doing this, practicing it only a couple of times, incredibly good at paying attention to the effect that stress has on you. Then your judgment will start to flourish. Then your creativity will start to flourish. And here's the greatest thing of all. You are surrounded by people that you're leading or managing or supervising or influencing who are also experiencing this very same thing, but much like you, they're just gritting their teeth, putting their head down, and ignoring the physical sensations of fear and saying, oh, I guess I just shouldn't feel that way. I guess I'm just overworked. You can help them after you've practiced this 1, 2, 3 times, and you will take control and have an amazingly positive outcome. Hey, thanks for taking a little bit of time with us today. I appreciate it. If you like this, how about going down to that little thumb and giving it a like button? Just like that, right there. That's one little thing you could do. Click if you liked it. If you think this was worthwhile or helpful and you want to share it with somebody, there's a little arrow. Click the share button and then share it with somebody. It doesn't cost anything. They don't get put on a list. We don't chase them down. You know how that is. And then, of course, hit the subscribe button as well. All 3 of those things will help us know that this is worthwhile. And it'll help you spread the tool. It'll be worthwhile to you as well. There you go. Small change, big difference right away. It's good to visit with you. Have a great day. Here's to you.